Dave Zampano joining us here from the Estate Planning Law Center, and some news for the new year. Dave, never the wrong time, never too late. I would say, well, maybe that's the whole point that we talk to you sometimes. Sometimes it is too late, and that's why you warn us. But Dave, when we talk about estate planning, there are so many ways to protect your assets and put so many different things in place so you don't leave that burden to your family. Things go the right way, they get to the right people, and you don't have to worry, right? And hey, Happy New Year, Dave.
Thank you, you too. And
yeah, Happy New Year.
I hope everybody have great holidays. And now, isn't this funny? Like one day transforms mindsets. You kind of leave everything behind from the year before, but not the legal stuff. You can't leave that behind.
No.
It has to roll forward with you.
It follows you.
You can't leave. Yes, you can't leave behind your mistakes and your bad decisions. They'll all come back to haunt you.
Just the mindset, though. That's a great point, though. We try to start fresh, right, on our thinking.
Yeah. It's funny, the things that tortured us in 23. We're like, okay, we have a fresh start. It took a fresh start. Actually, if we can get that philosophy every day, it'd be great, right? If we just wake up every day, well, whatever happened yesterday was yesterday. Today's a new day. We get to move forward. Mm-hmm. So as we move forward today on January 3rd, there's some new adjustments to well-known numbers within the estate tax world. Let's start first with the estate tax exemption amount. So many people know if you go to work and you earn a paycheck, you pay income taxes on that. You pay FICA taxes and things of that nature. Whatever's left, you go home and you spend, and whatever you don't spend, you save. You put it in your savings account, you put it in your investment account, maybe your 401k account. Well, the government says if you save too much over your lifetime, then they're going to tax you again, what's called an estate tax. And the estate tax is tax if you die with assets more than a certain amount. What is that amount? January 1st, the amount went to $13,610,000 for a single person, or double that, $27,220,000 for a married couple. Now, you say, okay, that's a lot of money. It is. However, that is changing at the end of 25. So we're into our second. This very high number was instituted back in the Trump administration, I think in its first year or second, and it expires at the end of 25. So we have 2 more years of these big numbers. Then they're going to drop down to a much lower rate, which was set before his increases. Now, why do I say that? Because New York State's estate tax exemption is still at the old rates of the federal government. And for 2024, in New York State, your New York estate tax exemption is $6,940,000 for an individual, or $13,880,000 per couple, which means if you accumulate that much money, you'll pay no estate tax. If you do pay an estate tax, the federal estate tax level begins at 40% and ends at 40%, meaning it's a flat 40% rate. In New York State, it's a little bit different. New York State, it's up to 16%. So if you get up to the $6.94 million, you pay an additional 16%. However, which is really weird, if you go too far over that amount, it actually taxes you from $0. So it's really interesting. If you have an estate that kind of hovers right around the $7 million mark, you really want to make sure that you get planning in place so you don't get taxed from $1. That's what they call the estate tax cliff here in New York State. So you can exempt up to $6,940,000, but if you have more than $6,940,000, you actually pay from $1.
Dave, if you can just indulge me on this question, but you know the area, you work here. Are there people that have estates around here in like the Mohawk Valley, estates valued at that much?
I'm going to tell you, Rocco, I've been doing this over 30 years now, and I remember the good old days when the estate tax exemption used to be $300,000, then it went to $600,000, then it went to $1 million back in 2001. And, those are such high numbers. The stock market, when I always tell people, in 32 years of doing this, I've never had anyone come into me, a millionaire, from putting money in a bank. Now, that doesn't mean take your money out of banks. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying the interest rates you earn on CDs just can't compound fast enough to really get that massive growth. But in the stock market, on average, and again, I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not making any advice here, but if you look back to the Great Recession back in the 1929 timeframe, to date, over any 10-year period, it tends to return between 12 and 14% a year. A lot of people don't have the stomach for it, but yeah, with the compounding of those stock markets, it's 7 million, not a ton of people, but a lot of people in the $2 to $4 to $5 million range, they've just worked hard, put their money away, put it in the stock market, let it grow. The challenge becomes is the longer you live, the more it grows. So under the rule of 72, as it's called, if you take your rate of return and divide it into 72, that tells you how many years it takes to double. So if we just said you earn 7.2%, now we said the market on average earns between 10 and 12%. So let's say you went and put your money in a CD that was earning 7.2%. That would double every 10 years. So the stock market's a little more aggressive. So say the stock market portfolios are doubling every 7 years. Well, in 7 years, if you got $1 million today, in 7 years you got $2 million. In 14 years you got $4 million, right? In 21 years you got $8 million. So again, that's pure, like you never took any money out, and never spent any money.
Right.
It does the power of compounding. So the answer is yes. There are a lot more people than you know with that amount of money, but it's not common. I wouldn't say it's 5 out of 10 or 2, but 1 out of 10 may.
I think 1 out of 10. I think 1 out of 10 is sitting in this room with us right now.
It's Rocco's birthday. If you want to go ahead and send that list along.
Rocco, you better get over it. You better get over and get that estate tax planning done.
He's waiting for his Christmas gift from
Dave, can you
across
talk
the
a
table.
little bit about 401ks and retirement plans, and are they included as part of your estate, or if they pass to someone who've named a beneficiary?
Absolutely,
and
they are
income taxes
included in
as
part
well.
of your estate. So one of the things that we're always worried about when someone has a taxable estate is how much retirement accounts do they have. Because you're ready for this? If you have a retirement account and your estate is over the limit, so that's 6.9 million, 6,940 for New York and 13.6 million for federal. Not only is that IRA taxed and estate tax, but it's also taxed in income tax. So in New York State, for example, if you had a taxable estate and retirement account, 74 cents on every dollar would go to taxes, and 26 cents would go to your family. So really important. Again, not urgent if you don't have $7 million. But again, you got to watch that number. And those that do, there are some great strategies we have to minimize that tax and even eliminate it in many cases. Again, using legal strategies that the government permits. You got to jump through the hoops. And then, that's a great question, Mark.
Dave, along those lines, but maybe a little different as we started off here, getting into the new year, our elected officials always make change or they do things with rules sometimes. So are there I want to use the right word.
You're being very diplomatic here.
Yes, I'm trying to. It's a new year, right? Serenity now. We talked about that earlier. But so are there any things of concern? So I know that there are groups out there and organizations that are pushing to double the aging budget and requesting more for an increase. So the older population, which is increasing here in New York, can remain at home, and that may eliminate some of those Medicaid costs that go along. So do any of those changes as far as what we pay in or what programs are being provided, does that have anything to do with the new year?
Well, I can give you a couple other updates. So the answer is yes, those numbers change a little. The question becomes, New York is very, very generous. It's probably next to California the most generous state to individuals. In other words, if somebody were to go in a nursing home today and they have assets, there is a certain amount you're allowed. So the federal limit is $154,000 if you're married. If you're married, you can have $154,000, $154,140. It's called the Community Spouse Resource Allowance. So it would it would enable you to maintain, if you're the community spouse, the well spouse can have $154,000 of assets plus their house plus a car. So those numbers have gone up. What's also gone up is the income allowance. So the community spouse minimum monthly maintenance needs allowance, they call it. We call it the triple M&A in the legal world. That has gone up to $3,853. Now, what does that mean? That means that if one of you went into the nursing home, the other spouse living at home, they call them the community spouse, would be able to retain the first $3,853 a month of income. And then, so that would preserve the monthly income. So it's almost $50,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Plus, you get to deduct for your health insurance, so you could also keep enough money to pay the monthly health insurance of the institutionalized spouse. So those numbers have gone up.
Really?
Is it still the rule that if the community spouse income alone exceeds the 3853, then they would have to contribute only 25% of the excess income for the care of the institutionalized spouse?
So this would be an example if you had one spouse that worked and ended up getting a pension. Let's say they got a pension and their pension is $4,053 a month. The husband, let's say it's the husband, he worked and it's $4,053. Well, he's entitled to keep $3,853, so he's $200 over. So Medicaid would require all of the institutionalized spouse's income. So in this case, the wife, all of her Social Security and pension would go to the nursing home, and 25% of the extra $200 of the community spouse's income.
So I'm glad, Dave, that you answered in that way and that Mark asked that follow-up, because that kind of goes back to one of those stories I was reading, and we might not see this affect us immediately if these changes do come into play here in New York. As I mentioned, AARP, a number of other organizations asking for some of the increase for the aging budget. Excuse me. And again, that effort is to try to get that aging population to remain at home. So you wouldn't be you wouldn't be institutionalized. You wouldn't be using those facilities. Your spouse, the loved one, they would remain at home. So I wonder how some of that would end up changing. Not only what Mark mentioned, the percentage that would have to be paid in, but just, how your assets were looked at when it comes to the care that was being offered to you. Because I know they're looking at home delivery meals again, case management, transportation, and a lot of that would be community-based. So you're not institutionalized. And again, I guess the effort on the back end would be to reduce those Medicaid costs that go along with the aging population.
Yeah.
So, that'd be interesting.
The interesting thing is they all interplay, and sometimes they're connected and sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
So you got a tremendous amount of federal programs, you got a tremendous amount of state programs. And, sometimes one affects the others and sometimes they're just independent of each other. So and that's kind of but the Medicaid one is the biggest, I think, that affects most people because it applies to both care in your home and care in the nursing home. So that kind of becomes the benchmark to look at. Interesting. I'm trying to see here what other numbers I have.
Dave, before you get on that, on the situation where you're seeking community-based Medicare, so you're living in the home, as Jason pointed out, when they do an asset review to determine if you're eligible based on your assets, is there still no 5-year look-back period? If you're in the nursing home, if you're institutionalized, and they do an assessment to see if you're eligible, they look back over 5 years to see if you've made any uncompensated transfers. When you're when you're still in your home and you seek Medicaid for community-based Medicaid, is it still the rule that they don't look back? I think they look back just 1 month, right?
Correct. It's also different income limits. So where I talked about that income limit of $3,853 for community Medicaid, it's only $1,808. So it's weird. They've got these different rules depending on whether you want care in your home or care in the nursing home. The good news is that whatever the numbers are, there's multiple strategies. I'm going to call them layers of strategies. There's layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 that we can protect and manage depending upon each individual's fact pattern. We can sit here and throw out numbers, right? The challenge is it's not just a number. It's a type of asset. Is it retirement accounts? You know, if you have retirement accounts, they're treated differently than a brokerage account or differently than a bank account. And so as you start to look at each individual's fact pattern, we can massage and look and adapt to each fact pattern to get the best result, I should say, that maintains and maximizes the protection of the most amount of money. Again, some other interesting things around this is also like the basic star exemption, right? So a lot of people know they have taxes on their homes, property taxes, school taxes. And so, everybody gets basic star exemption of incomes up to $250,000 or $500,000 if you're doing it online. And then the enhanced star exemption, which provides a much greater benefit, even a refundable credit. They can either reduce the tax or they can issue a check and refund. That now is going up to $98,700. So for the enhanced star, you have to be over age 65, and then you have to have income of $98,700 or less. The interesting thing is, for the 2024 star, the income limits are based on your tax return filed in 2022. The strange rules are 2 years delayed, so they use your 2022 tax return to determine your 2024 star exemption. Another one very popular people forget about is the gift tax. We'll talk about the gift tax for a second. What does that mean? Well, you ever heard the old story, you can give $15,000 away. They should say, you can give $15,000 away.
Listen up, Rocco, it's your birthday. Yeah.
January 1st, the number went to $18,000, which means what? Well, that number I gave you before, that $13 million number for federal estate tax and that $7 million number for New York estate tax, the way it works is the government says we're going to allow you to accumulate and give away up to those amounts. So I'm rounding up $7 million for New York and $13.6 million for federal. And they say, we don't care if you give that away when you die or if you give it away during life, you only get to give that much away. So what they do is they say, all right, you're allowed to give a minimum amount away every year to person. So I can give to anyone in the world I want $18,000, and that would be gift tax-free and estate tax-free. So it would not affect my estate tax exemption. So if I gave Mark, Rocco, and Jay $18,000 each, you'd say thank you. I would not have anything to do. But if I gave you each $20,000, then I would have to file a gift tax return. I actually have to file a gift tax return for the 18, but I show it's exempt. But if I gave you each 20, I would file the gift tax return for 18, and then for each one of you, I would have given $2,000 extra, which means my lifetime exemption, that $13,610,000 or the $6,940,000 for New York, would be reduced by $6,000. So it would reduce dollar for dollar how much I can die with before I pay an estate tax.
All right, Mark, you got one final one or a comment?
I'm just going to say, Dave, following up on the gift tax, that $18,000, people get mistaken about that. It's not a limit. If your total estate, say, is $300,000, that's the most you have, you could give it all away. There's no restriction on how much you give away, and you would not have to pay a gift tax on that. So that people think
Correct.
that they can't give away more than $18,000. You can give away all you want. You can give away $10 million if you want to. The only issue becomes how it affects your ultimate estate tax. But there's no restriction on giving money away. People think there is, there isn't. So I just want to point that out.
Here's the differential. It's a great point, Mark, and it goes right back to my previous comment. We can give more than $18,000 away. There's no penalty. However, we have to remember, whenever we give a gift, technically we have to file a gift tax return. So those gift tax returns should be filed, even technically with the $18,000, if you did it under the $18,000 limit. If you give more than $18,000, though, you do have to file a gift tax return, which, again, no tax is due. It just reduces your federal limit. But if you don't have $8 million or $7 million, you're never going to have that much. It doesn't really matter. Again, best thing is always to just review your thoughts, because I'm not a big fan of giving money away for the sake of protecting it, because you're not protecting money when you give it away. You're putting it from your creditors and predators to the people you gave it away to's creditors and predators. There's so many people who come and say, I'll just give it to my kids, and then their kids end up in a divorce, and then some of that money ends up going to an ex-spouse, or they get sued, they get in a car accident, or they end up, maybe the person you give it to ends up needing a nursing home. I've seen all kinds of crazy things happen. There's better ways to protect your assets. Giving it away is not the best way.
All right.
It exposes it to a lot of different things.
Well, Dave, a good way to start off the new year with some good pointers, some good tips. So if we want to continue to follow and maybe we want to learn more, how do we do that?
Well, it's always eplawcenter.com or call the office 315-793-3622. We run a series of workshops now. We have estate planning essentials. We have your retirement plan essentials, and we have Medicaid and long-term care planning essentials. And we cover all those topics and on each of the three, so people can stay in control and be informed. And they're free to the community, as they have been for over 30 years. And we're excited. We offer them every week, every 10 days or so. So just call the office or go to the website, eplawcenter.com, and get yourself educated on everything.
All right, yeah. As Dave mentioned, 315-793-3622, eplawcenter.com. Dave Zampano joining us here on the program. Dave, we thank you. We'll talk to you soon. And again, Happy New Year.
Thank you, gents. Have a great day.